as people are coming in, I'm going to give you a little quiz. So, anybody who has heard of the Nobel Peace Prize, put your hands up. Yeah. Okay. Anybody who has heard of Bertha von Suttner, put your hand up. Bertha von Suttner. No? Bertha von Suttner was a woman who was an ardent pacifist. She was very good friends with Alfred Nobel. She was the inspiration, the entire inspiration behind the Nobel Peace Prize. If it hadn't been for her, there wouldn't have been a Nobel Peace Prize. Okay? And I'm starting this session with that story because she has been erased out of our histories, right? And this is the story of women peacemakers around the world, throughout history, even today in the context that we look at, that we see. When we think of the Kenya mediation that happened after 2009, who is the name that often comes up as the outsider that went in to sort it out? Kofi Annan. Kofi Annan went in with Graça Machel. If it hadn't been for Graça Machel, the interactions with the women's groups who had been the ones who demanded the inclusion of the international community would not have happened. Graça Machel has been erased out of the history of mediation. So I can give you endless stories of what happens to women. And I specifically wanted to start this session with this message because this time 15 years ago, there was a small group of women who were working behind the scenes in London and New York and various places on the crazy idea of getting a Security Council resolution that would recognize women's roles in peacemaking. And I actually wanted to give you the names of those women because they are not well-known figures in our collective history, and they should be. I was involved in it myself.
Listen, I know this is rude, but this is a perfect. I have to interrupt you because a peacemaker in her own right has walked in, Dr. Bernice King, and there has been much coverage of her mother and her role. So she was just speaking about this, Bernice. So it's good timing.
Thank you. Yes. So I just wanted to just give you the list of the names of the women who were working, that I worked with, who were behind the sort of the engine behind the drafting and the lobbying and so forth of 1325. We worked with a collective of women around the world and got their voices captured into the work. But it was a small group, and these are the women who were working with me. Felicity Hill from the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom. She was one of the strongest advocates for this work, an ardent nuclear disarmament person. She's continuing her work and is now, I think, in Australia. Eugenia Pisa-Lopez was one of the brains behind the idea of having a massive strategic campaign called Women Building Peace from the village council to the negotiating table, and articulated that we need partnerships with NGOs and civil society, that we need a public element, we needed a prize, a peace prize, which was only funded for 1 year, and a policy framework. And when we were designing it, Eugenia said Security Council, European Union, Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. We got all three of those resolutions in the same year in 2000. How many people know her? I think maybe 2 or 3 people in this room. Cora Wise, who has been part of the peace movement in America forever and ever, and was a big presence in New York and at the Hague Appeal for Peace. Betty Reardon, who's the mother of peace education in the United States. Maha Mona and Ramina Joel, who came from the Women's Refugee Commission and brought the whole agenda of women's refugee and IDP experiences. And I worked with International Alert and Eugenia. So, and we had Florence Martin from Amnesty International, who was our access to the French mission at the time. The French were supportive of this. So these are the women who are behind this agenda, and nobody knows them. It's extraordinary. They should be known. They should be part of the 15-year celebration. And I can tell you they probably won't be, because somehow that story doesn't count. But I really wanted you all to know about it, because the erasing of what women do is so much a part of the challenges that we are dealing with. So with that in mind, I wanted to just share with you a couple of thoughts. That when this agenda was starting, it was not a case of civil society pushing forward and thinking we can do this on our own. It was actually a collaboration. It was reaching out to the UN. It was reaching out to governments. I remember inviting the US mission to come to one of our meetings at the CSW, and people said, why have you invited the US government? And I said, well, why not? They sit on the Security Council. So in the same way that we say, you know, should we or should we not work with religious figures, it's the same thing with governments. Who do we work with? Where do we find mutual interest? But at the same time, always the fear of being co-opted, always the fear of having what our message is being changed and exploited and warped into something that is theirs. And that's one of the challenges that we have with this agenda at the moment. The other point about this is that along the way, we started with this strong message of participation, and it's always notable for me that Bangladesh and Namibia and Jamaica, who sat on the Security Council at the time, really understood why we were talking about the importance of having women at the peace table. Vietnam, that supported the agenda later on with Resolution 1889, which I really recommend everybody to read, supported it, the participation agenda. The United States and the United Kingdom, that have become such big voices in this arena, have been the ones that have supported the victimization message. So it's ironic that our Western governments go back into the realm of talking about women as victims, whereas it's from the rest of the world where we keep saying, no, it's about participation, it's about us at the table speaking on our own behalf. My point of me, not your point of me, if you want. So this is another dilemma that we have, and we need to challenge why that's happening. And then in some of the conversations, we often talk about being patient, the need to be patient. No, as far as I'm concerned, for two reasons. Number one, you lose opportunities. If we had waited around and thought, well, let's work this carefully and let's do this and let's wait and see what happens and not keep pushing not putting the pressure on, what would have happened was that the membership of the Security Council would have changed. We would have had new governments, and before you know it, we would have had very unfriendly governments, and maybe we would never have gotten the agenda. So it was a window of opportunity. We seized it, and for all the good and bad and frustration that we have, it's given us this incredible tool to carry on working with. It could have easily not have happened. And sometimes we forget that 15 years ago, there was so little discourse on women's experiences of war, of what women do. Now it's everywhere. So we have made progress. It's just that we're impatient about the realities on the ground. And the other reason why I'm personally impatient is because I don't want our generation to be talking to our kids saying, hey, it was on our watch that the world got really, really messed up. We're seeing the early warning signs. We've talked about them. And women are really at the front lines of seeing the changes on a regular basis. Every one of you in this room has talked about that. And we're not just talking about ISIS emerging, in August of this year. We're talking, for some of you, it's 5 years ago. For some, it's 10. For some of you, it goes back to the early 1980s. So you were seeing these signs. And the challenge that we have, and again, the impatience that I have, is that people aren't listening to us. They're not listening to you. And we often have this conversation of, well, we must bring women to to meet with policymakers. What I find striking is that we have at the international level a shift. We've seen a shift from not talking to non-state armed actors to talking to them. In the 1990s, we didn't talk to armed rebel groups. The UN didn't talk to armed rebel groups inside a country. Then they realized they had to because it's an internal conflict. We came along, we have all these policy frameworks for women. Still, they ask us, who are these women? On what basis? They're asking the legitimacy of women and civil society. But I've seen it with my own eyes and heard it with my own eyes that we go places and we'll say, oh, we must talk to the clan elders. Nobody asks, who are they? How were they selected? On what basis do we? No, we will go and talk to anybody who is male, slightly older, if they're wearing a suit, or maybe not. But when it comes to women, we're asking so many questions around Who is she? Is she elite? Is she grassroots? Is she qualified? Is she not qualified? Is she political? Is she apolitical? Constantly we're finding excuses to exclude women. And that's basic sexism, I think. I don't know what else to call it. And so we have to recognize that there are some fundamental barriers that are related to women specifically, and it's time to sort of bust through the myths, because they will give us all sorts of fancy explanations, but it's really not about that. It's really about just going ahead and doing this work. So with that in mind, I wanted to turn to a few people in the room who have been doing this work, and for them to share with you their experiences. And then I have the list of people with their hands up somewhere here that we're meant to go through. Is that right? And we will make sure that everybody gets a chance to speak. And if possible, please keep your comments brief so that we can get around the entire room, because it's the last session of the day, and we would love to make sure that everybody has been heard. So, thank you. So I'm going to first ask Fatima Al-Badali from Basra to talk to us about what it's like to be on the ground in a war zone, trying to do peace work, what she does and what her challenges are in terms of engaging with authorities, whether it's national or international, the good and the bad side. Thank you, Fatima.
Can you put on your headsets, because Fatima will make use of translation. So we'll give a second for everyone to get your headsets in place. Just a moment. Is everyone ready? Okay.
بصراحة أريد أن أخبركم نحن بعد سقوط النظام لم نكن نعرف هنالك مؤسسات أو جمعيات، وإنما كان لدينا حب العمل للنساء. أتت هذه الرغبة لأنني أنا تعرضت للاعتقال من قبل النظام السابق سنة 93 و 99، وتم تهديم دارنا. وفترة السجن التي قضيتها كنت أتمنى أن أخرج من هذا المعتقل كي أقدم شيئا للمجتمع. مع أن بدأ سنة 2003 وزوال النظام، فكرت أن أعمل شيئا إلى المجتمع. لا أقول لكم حصلنا على دعم في البدء، بل كان هو تطوع ذاتي فيما بيننا. مجموعة من النساء كنا نذهب إلى المناطق الريفية لتعليمهم القراءة والكتابة وفيما يتعلق بأمور الصحة. اكتشفنا احتراض جدا كبير من قبل المجتمع، خاصة من رجال الدين ومن شيوخ العشائر، بمعنى أنتم تريدون أن تنشروا الحرية للمرأة، هذه أفكار الغرب، ماذا تريدون أن تحققوا للمرأة من القراءة والكتابة؟ بصراحة لم أيأس من هذا الأمر عندما طردوني بالمرة الأولى، وذهبت طرقت الباب مرة ثانية لكنهم رفضوا. آخر مرة لابد أن أفكر بطريقة حتى أصل إلى هؤلاء النساء. إذا أنا منعوني مرة أو مرتين بمعنى أنني يأست، ففكرت في طريقة هو إقناعهم عن طريق الدين. لست فقيهة في ديني ولست حافظة للقرآن، لكنني أتيت بأشياء هم يحبونها كثيرا. قلت لهم: أليس أنتم تحبون الحسين؟ أليس أنتم دائما تذكرون الحسين وتذكرون عاشوراء وتذكرون السيدة زينب كيف قاتلت مع الحسين؟ ألم تكن زينب هي متعلمة؟ كثيرا من الروايات تقول أن السيدة زينب كانت تقرأ القصائد، السيدة زينب كانت تجالس الرجال، السيدة زينب كانت تقف أمام الطغاة. فإذا جاء دوركم لتسمحوا للنساء أن يتعلموا. أن تعليم المرأة القراءة والكتابة لا يعني بمعنى أنها حصلت على الحرية والانحراف كما تتصورون، بل ربما تقدم لكم الخدمة التي تريدونها، ربما تعرف واجباتكم أكثر، تربية أولادكم أكثر، ربما تصبحون تعرفون شيئا كثيرا عن المجتمع. والحمد لله وفقت في هذا، وقد تم استهداف أكثر من 6000 امرأة لتعليمهم القراءة والكتابة خلال 3 سنوات. اكتشفنا من خلال التثقيف أن معظم هؤلاء النساء متزوجات زواج خارج المحكمة، وأقصد بالزواج خارج المحكمة بأنها متزوجة فقط عند الشيخ وتنجب الأطفال، والأطفال يكبرون لكن لا يمتلكون أي أوراق رسمية تثبت أنهم موجودين في الحياة، لأنهم لم يسجلوا ضمن المحكمة. كان الموضوع جدا صعب علينا، أن هؤلاء النساء معاناتهم كثيرة، فبدأنا نفكر بطريقة كيف نصل إلى هؤلاء النساء مرة أخرى. حاولنا أن نحصل على الدعم البسيط، لا أقول من منظمات دولية، وإنما أيضا عن طريق جمع التبرعات من الناس الخيرين والقطاع الخاص وبعض التجار، ووفرنا مجموعة من المحاميات، وتم عقد لأكثر من 200 امرأة عقود زواج، وأثبتنا لأولادهم الهويات الأصلية حتى يتمكنوا من التسجيل داخل المدارس. وشعرنا بفخر خلال السنتين أننا أنجزنا عمل تقريبا لأكثر من 250 امرأة هؤلاء النساء أصبحوا هم مسجلات ضمن القانون العراقي. لم نكتفي بهذا العمل، إنما اكتشفنا أن المجتمع يحتاج أكثر، المرأة تحتاج أكثر، ليس المرأة الريفية فقط، وإنما اكتشفنا المرأة المتعلمة لا تعرف شيئا بالقوانين. بدأت أشارك في كل الدورات سواء كانت داخل العراق أو خارج العراق. ما هي اتفاقية سيداو؟ ما هو قانون 1325؟ فبدأت أحصل على المعلومات الكافية عبر الإنترنت، وبدأت أزور النساء في المدارس، المدرسات، بدأت أحكي معهم ما هي اتفاقية سيداو. اكتشفت أن نسبة الكثير من النساء وأن كانوا متعلمات وحاصلات على شهادات لكن لا يعرفون من هي اتفاقية سيداو، ما هي حقوق المرأة، ما هو الجندر. تصور أن بعض الأشخاص كنا نسألهم ما هو الجندر، كانوا يقولون نوع من أنواع النبات الطبيعي. البعض يقول منهم الجندر ربما نوع من تسميات الجيش عند الغرب، لكن عندما ذكرنا لهم معنى النوع الاجتماعي هو أن يكون للمرأة دور وللرجل دور في المجتمع حتى ممكن أن يمارسان حرياتهما. استغلينا المناسبات الجميلة التي هي ربما يراها البعض عندنا في الشرق، وأقول في الإسلام إنها محرمة. مثلا عيد الحب، لا نقدر أن نتحدث عن عيد الحب في العراق مثلا أو في الجنوب ونقول عيد الحب. هذا عيد الحب هو عيد خاص بالغرب، ماذا يريدون فيه عيد الحب؟ فكتبت على الفيسبوك غدا سيكون عيد الحب، ومن يريد أن يحتفل بعيد الحب عليه أن يحضر هدية ووردة حمراء. طبعا كان تخوف كثير من الجميع أنهم يحضروا، ربما هنالك مكيدة أو ربما هنالك حزب يتابع الأمر أو ربما يكون جهاز أمن يراقب هذا الموضوع. لكنني فوجئت بحضور أكثر من 300 شاب من كلا الجنسين يحملون الهدايا ويحملون الورود الحمراء ليحتفلوا بعيد الحب، حتى نبين لكل العالم وخاصة في العراق أن عيد الحب ليس العيد الذي أنتم تتصوروه هو الغرام والعشق كما تظنون. وزرنا دور المسنين، الناس الذين يعانون من الإهمال، زرنا الكنائس وزرنا المساجد وزرنا مقرات العسكريين وقدمنا لهم الورود الحمراء وطلبنا منهم أن يحققوا الأمان بالعراق. فبينا للمجتمع البصري، وكانت هذه الفعالية انتشرت عبر الفيسبوك إنها فعالية جدا رائعة، وما زالت تستمر هذه الفعالية كل سنة بعيد الحب. لم نكتفي بهذا، بل كل بداية عام أيضا يسمى عندنا، أقول في الجنوب أنه بداية كل عام هو عيد المسيح، وهذا خاص بالغرب. بداية السنة الجديدة هي ليس خاصة بالمسلمين، فلماذا نحتفل بالسنة الجديدة في الجنوب؟ أيضا بدأنا نرفع الرايات التي تكتب عليها رايات بيضاء نكتب عليها نعم للسلام، نستقبل العام الجديد، لا للطائفية لا للعنف لا للتطرف، لنبدأ حياة جديدة ببداية العام. وكنا نستأجر الزوارق ونذهب في شط العرب ونرفع هذه اللافتات أمام أنظار الجميع، فاكتشفنا عددنا كان عدد قليل لكن بدأ الناس ينضمون إلينا. معاناة كثيرة وجدناها داخل المجتمع، منها انعدام عدم وجود المدارس، البنى التحتية مهدمة، انقطاع الكهرباء لقبل سنتين كان يتجاوز أكثر من 20 ساعة في اليوم. هذه الكهرباء أدت إلى وفيات كثيرة بسبب ارتفاع درجات الحرارة في الصيف. فخرجت أنا وأنا كنت صائمة أرفع لافتة وأكتب نطالب بتحسين الكهرباء في البصرة. كنت وحدي أمام مبنى المحافظة، كان الشرطة ينظرون باستغراب، يقولون هذه المرأة مجنونة في هذا النهار وهذا الجو الحار وهي ترفع لافتة تطالب بالكهرباء. فوجئت اليوم الثاني يكون العدد 25 معي من الشباب، اليوم الثالث يكون 50، وإذا اليوم العاشر من رمضان يصبح عددنا 1150 شخص يطالبون بتحسين مستوى الكهرباء. كنت جدا فرحة وفخورة وأنا راجعة للبيت أنه ازداد عدد الناس لنطالب بتحسين الكهرباء. أنا لا أريد أن تنزلوا دموعي وتعتبرونني، لكنني أحكي لكم المعاناة. أنه عندما رجعت فوجئت أن إطلاق ناري باب البيت وأنهم هددوني بقتل أطفالي إذا خرجت. طبعا لا أخفي عليكم بقيت أنا فترة بعيدة لأن أخاف على أطفالي، مما اضطررت أن أترك المنزل لفترة معينة وأذهب إلى محافظة أخرى. بقيت فترة بعيدة عن البيت وحتى أطفالي لا أعرف خبرهم أين هم وماذا حدث لهم لأنني بعثتهم إلى أهلي. لكنني وجدت في نفسي إذا أنا تركت بلدي وإذا تركت محافظتي وتركت المجتمع وغيري يتركه نتيجة تهديد، فمن الذي يعمل إلى المجتمع؟ فوجئت هنالك مع شيء في داخلي يحفزني على العودة إلى المحافظة وأنا أعمل من جديد. لابد أن أعمل مع الشرطة، إذا لابد أن أطرق باب القوات الأمنية حتى توفر لي حمايتي. فبدأت أعمل مع الشرطة عن طريق الدخول إلى مقراتهم، أعطاء الدورات عن السلام ونبذ العنف لمجموعة من العسكريين والشباب البسطاء. اكتشفت الكل يحب رفع السلاح، الكل لابد أن يحصل على السلاح حتى يحارب من؟ لا أدري من، كل واحد كان لديه عدو معين. طبعا لا أخفي عليكم صعوبة الدخول إلى المقرات العسكرية، كيف أدخل من يسمح لي؟ كان الأمر جدا صعب. ففكرت في طريقة حتى أقنع القائد العسكري بالدخول، فجمعت تبرعات أيضا، وأيضا جمعت تبرعات حتى من أخواتي لأنهم مدرسات لديهم رواتب، فقلت لهم تبرعوا لي برواتبكم هذا الشهر، واشتريت المواد الغذائية وذهبت للقائد العسكري وقلت له أنا سمعت أنكم تحتاجون إلى المواد الغذائية فممكن أن نقدم لكم المساعدات. طبعا شعر بفخر جدا كبير أنه هنالك امرأة تريد تقدم لهم الدعم، فقال لي أنه أول امرأة في البصرة ربما وفي العراق تجرأت تدخل مقراتنا، وبدأ يسمح لي، وتقريبا أكثر من 45 لقاء حققناه مع الشرطة. بدأت أدخل لكل مكان أجد فيه هنالك سلبية والمجتمع يخاف. أحكي لكم أنا لا أريد أن ألفظ هذا اللفظ وأقول أنا أقول أنا عراقية، لا أريد أذكر حتى ديني، لكنني بصراحة بعض الأمور تجعلني أذكر من أكون لديانة أو مذهب. أنا امرأة فاطمة عراقية، لا أحب من أقول أنا مسلمة أو شيعية، لكن مرات الوضع يتطلب منا أن نقول. المذهب الشيعي كل سنة يمارس طقوس لإحياء عاشوراء، ومن هذه الطقوس التي تمارس هو الضرب على الوجه وسفك الدماء في كل جانب. وفوجئت حتى الأطفال، وأمس رأيت إحدى أخواتي الموجودات القس كانت موجودة قربي، صور لأطفال لعمر 4 سنوات فقط يذهبون أهلهم يأخذوهم في طوابير كبيرة حتى يضربون أنفسهم بالسيف تمجيدا إلى الحسين. فاكتشفت أن العدد يزداد في عاشوراء، وخاصة يوم 10 محرم، أن عدد خاص هذه السنة التي مضت، نقول قبل 4 أشهر تقريبا، أنه 5000 من بين عمر طفل ل4 سنوات إلى عمر 18 سنة يمسكون السيف ويضربون أنفسهم، والدماء تسيل في كل جانب، ويرتدون قطعة القماش الأبيض ويقولون يا حسين. ففكرت أن هذه الطريقة الخاطئة، هذا الإرهاب، الطفل الذي يمسك السيف في عمر 4 سنوات بمعنى أنه قادر بعد كم يوم يقتل الجار والأخ والزوجة والأخت ويذبح جميع الناس، إذا لا فرق بيننا وبين داعش الذي يقتل الناس في كل مكان. فحاولت أجمع هؤلاء الشباب وأتحدث معهم، قلت لهم الإمام الحسين لا يريد الدم أن تسفكوا في الأرض، ولا يريد الإمام الحسين أن تكون هذه المظاهر السلبية والمخيفة أمام المجتمع. الإمام الحسين يريدنا نحن 5000 أن نقوم بزراعة الأشجار في كل مكان، وعندما تثمر هذه الأشجار فالإمام الحسين يفرح، وعندما ننظف المدرسة الإمام الحسين يفرح، وعندما نزور المرضى الإمام الحسين يفرح. وأتمنى هذه الدماء التي تسفكوها في الأرض أن تعطوها لأخوتكم المحتاجين في المستشفى، فهنالك الكثير من الحالات المرضية الذين هم بحاجة إلى هذه الدماء. لا أريد أن أبالغ وأقول لكم من 5000 أخذت عدد كبير، لكنني قدرت أن أسحب 27 شاب يذهبون يتبرعون بالدم بدل ما أن يضربوا أنفسهم ويسفكوا الدماء. معاناة كثيرة. آخر المعاناة أنه في الشهر 9 العام الماضي تم اختطافي من قبل البيت بسبب لأنني أقمت مهرجان كبير للسلام. المهرجان جمعت فيه أكثر من 2000 شاب، لأننا استخدمنا الأغاني داخل المهرجان تم خطفي وتهديدي بأنني امرأة أنا أمارس الحريات التي هي بعيدة عن الدين. أعتذر وأطلت في الحديث. شكرا لكم.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Fatima. I think we would have loved to hear truly the experience, so many different things that you are enduring right now. Thank you very much, and I'm sorry about the time. I was going to turn to Binta Diop now to take a different perspective. Binta, you've been working on these issues. You know women like Fatima across Africa, and you know the international system very well as well. If you wanted to tell us Yes. Would you like me to? Yeah, I wanted the parties to speak. Okay. Yes, now? Okay. So, Binta, you've been doing this work for so long. You know what it's, and now as an envoy to the AU, if you were, and maybe hopefully one day we will have you there, if you were the UN Secretary General tomorrow, what would you do to make this resolution real? What are the 4 or 5, 3 top things you would do? Thank you.
Yeah, right. This is a tough. It's a little task. On the spot, really. I think that there are so many others who wanted to speak, and but yes, I think the challenge this morning that the senator said was put the women at the right place and vote for her, make sure that they take a leadership position and they can make a difference. And of course, by saying that, they also have the women that we recognize, the men we recognize as feminists, like President Carter, the men that are in the rooms that are, But one of the key issues I'm listening, she's making great difference where she is. But I'm sure if you ask her about resources, how she's doing her job, the human rights defenders, not just they are put in jail, but they don't have any access, they don't have any resources. While we are talking, women are dying. Women are dying while we are talking here in the room. While we are talking women, we say that, we are paying lip service. We say, where are the resources? Where are the resources? We say they may be in the military. This morning we talk about it. Why are we sending millions and billions, not even millions, billions to the military, sending them while women are dying and women don't have the right tools? People even in this room, and we are the privilege. We are the privileged one. But look at down what these women are doing on the ground. Where are the resources? I think those are critical. If I was today, of course, the Secretary General is a hot seat, but I think a lot of things we will do. All of us, if we were put at that seat, I can take, for example, the African Union. The first thing I did, being a special envoy, just a special envoy, I went to see women in South Sudan, and I said, you are the one that we need to listen. The first time we are doing a commission of inquiry on South Sudan by the Africans themselves, and I was looking into the issues that the women that have been affected, those who have been raped. I can tell you if the report, I should not talk about the report, but the issue of violence against women is right there. It's right there. So you need to bring the voice of the voiceless, the civil society. What President is doing right now is what we should be doing. Bringing those that we don't hear, because making our member states accountable, because this is what we need. And one critical issue that, for example, this year is the year of women empowerment in Africa. This is 2015, but I can tell you, how are we going to empower women if we know that the African states have more than 2-digit growth, economic growth? Many countries have the economic growth in terms of building the road, the infrastructure, but what about the social inclusion? You go to the grassroots, nothing is there. If I was the SG, today I will call on this group as advising them, and President, you can do that. Call Ban Ki-moon to come and stay here and say, this is your group of advisors who are going to make sure that listen to them, because they are the people who can make a difference on what is happening now on the security of the whole world, not just on Africa. So many things, but the money is the key issue.
Thank you, Binta. I'd vote for you for sure. I'm going to turn to the list of people who have been very patiently waiting. I have your names here. I hope that I have everybody. In case I don't, do let me know. And I'm going to ask Nika Saidi from UNDP to give us a few words from the UN system. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I really enjoy being here. And I'm in the city of Martin Luther King, who had a dream. And I told to Mr. President that for many people in the world, it's not about the dream. We could not have dream. What we had, it was a faith. We had a faith that one day I will be sitting here with the people who all believe human beings have a soul, and our physical appearance cannot divide us. Human beings have been created noble and with dignity. And as a human rights defender, I work for UNDP. I do not consider anyone work for UN and do not consider themselves a human rights advisor or officer. Because the United Nations was created based on a human rights charter. Whatever I do in every day of my work, in any engagement with anyone, I have to consider, does it lead me to human rights or not? So if I work with the religious leaders, if I work with anyone, I would ask this question, and I'm mindful of the consequences. For example, I work in Afghanistan, and by that time I was not working for United Nations. And I did not engage religious leaders beyond their power in terms of how much as a human beings they can contribute. I work with them in a community because everyone has access, should have access to knowledge. Knowledge is a human right. So I engage with them, and they were much more helpful as anyone else. In their own power, they did help me. But I was opposing having all the religious leaders in one forum to giving fatwa on family planning. Why I opposed that? Because I knew it's not a theological discussion. It's a woman's rights, it's a public health issue. And I worked in Afghanistan, and I managed to keep it a public health issue. As the result, it still is functioning and is working, and people have a right to have access to contraceptives. If I would making it a theological discussion, I'm not sure it would be the same case. And I lived in Iran, I'm Iranian. So for 20 years, we were told the family planning should be practiced. And that was told by, in Iran, we have our religious leaders who is the head of a state. So we were told strongly that's a practice. And suddenly, overnight, it changed. And we were not anymore should practice family planning. As a human rights person, I never changed my mind that women have to have access to contraceptives. But with the religion, I'm not sure how can I manage that. So I'm not talking about the religion, I'm talking about being mindful, and anyone can share the agenda of promoting human rights is my partner, is my friend, and I work with them. And anyone who wants to be against that, I will stay next to them, because as a human rights person, I have learned I will be respecting anyone's rights beyond what they believe and what they don't believe.
Thank you, Nika. Let's hope that everybody at the UN thinks like you. I'm going to ask Seema Samar to comment. In terms of, again, Afghanistan, the experience, you've been so much a part of the framing and the history of what happened, and specifically in terms of women. After all these years, are women at the table? Is the international community living up to its commitments? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes and no. Yes, in terms of we really fight hard in order to be part of the emergency law jirga soon after 2002. Then we really fought in order to have few women in a position of power or in this decision-making position. But I have to say, it's not only having women on those positions, but are they really committed women and qualified women? But in countries like Afghanistan or any other post-conflict countries, I think the relationship matters more rather than the qualification of women. We had few women in the position of power. And of course, women in Afghanistan has been used by international community and also by the politician within the country. In 2009, when we had the second round of presidential election and President Karzai won the election after a lot of difficulties, that's another matter. But then he announced on his inauguration speech, he said he will give more women, he will put more women in a position of power. But when he introduced the cabinet, it was only one woman for Ministry of Women's Affairs. So what we did, we went out and we had hold a press conference and we shouted, not a month since he had the inauguration and he already forgot his promise. And then what we did, we didn't wait actually for him. I wrote a letter on behalf of women. I mean, I was not elected actually. I was just used the position I have in Afghanistan, that we want 5 ministries. So I put 3 names at least for each position. So he was pushed in a corner, so he put 3 women as a minister. And then they sent them to the parliament. Parliament did not vote for them. Only one of them got the vote of confidence for Ministry of Social Affairs. Then we had this High Peace Council or Consultative Peace Jirga, because President Karzai came here in Washington and they began to it was Karzai and President Bush, and they talked, and also Musharraf from Pakistan. They spoke about jirgas, to build a jirga for peace. And then in that jirga, of course, again, we fought in order to have a space over there. It was 200 to 300 women in that jirga out of 1,500 people. They listened to us, but at the end of the day, actually, when they decided to have High Peace Council, that was not the real agenda. The people's voice were not really heard, because the final statement was already written, that they want High Peace Council. So they established a High Peace Council, again put all the warlords and some of the religious leaders in that position. We fought against, we went out and we said that we should have women. So it was 69 people who are member of the High Peace Council and 9 are women. And then they tried to choose the good woman who doesn't really raise their voice and who really, yes, but they are women. And what's happening actually, practically that 9 women doesn't know what's going on in the High Peace Council. When this people goes to Qatar, for example, because they were a lot of discussion, if you all remember, that they are going to open office in Qatar, women were not involved. They went to Pakistan, women were not on the delegation. Because we raised a lot of concern and we shouted, they took few women with them to Turkey, because in Istanbul, the Turkish government offered that they will facilitate the Taliban office in Qatar in order to have a dialogue with them. So they took few women with them in Qatar, in Istanbul, but then they asked them to go and do shopping, and they were not sitting in the discussion, in the serious discussion about the Taliban. In reality, we do have a lot of, I mean, it was a lot of, again, money was given to this High Peace Council because they were doing this reconciliation or reintegration, actually, reintegration program. Women are not involved. I mean, they are practically not really effective. They don't know how the money are spent. They don't know exactly how many people really reintegrated to the program. And they don't know what they really does for a reintegration program. So I think the problem is that even if the delegation from UN or the other countries comes, it's mainly men who are talking. And they are going to talk with the men, not really women's, I mean, not really a lot of us. Maybe because to just show that they also saw some women in Afghanistan, they see some of us. I don't know how much they really listen to us and how much they put our opinion and ideas in the program. including for promote, let's say, I mean, the new program for Afghan women, promote. They plan USAID to spend $27 million per year for women's empowerment. But then you see that they select where they should spend the money. I think that the program, peace building or any other program, will not be very effective unless it comes from the people, unless it is according to the demand of the society, rather than imposing some of their opinion and ideas.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm going to turn to Michael Kimmel now. You've been sitting, listening to all the conversations and participating, and have a sort of meta view. So can you just, what do you think, and what are your thoughts on these issues? Thanks.
Thank you. My name is Michael Kimmel, and I'm a sociology professor at Stony Brook University in New York, and I run a center for the study of men and masculinities. And I want to say, and our mission, my work over my life has been to engage men and boys for gender equality, because quite simply, I believe that we can't empower women and girls unless we engage boys and men. And so that's been the work that I've taken on. And as I've listened to these stories that have been really inspiring, I don't have an inspiring story to share with you. I'm a sociologist, so I have a kind of analysis. And what I want to talk about is, I want to talk about a mood or a feeling, and then I want to talk about a sort of an analytic frame. And I'm hoping that not everyone will, I suspect not everyone will agree with me. But I want to refer back to something that Susan said in her opening comments this morning that was so important to me. It was about the intersectionality conversation, the ways in which in our work in gender studies, we don't talk, for example, about masculinity as a singular any longer. We talk about masculinities, plural, because we know that race and class and age and religion and region and sexuality all shape our notions of ourselves as men. And this is true, this intersectional analysis is not only true in any particular country, but it's true internationally, all the different levels of institutional responses and national and local responses. And I feel sometimes that when we're confronted with intersectionality, we get kind of depressed, because it just feels like, oh my God, who can speak? Because, you know, as soon as you say something, there's all these differences. I find intersectionality really hopeful. I am an activist, so by temperament, I'm an optimist. I believe change is possible. And so I find it hopeful. I find intersectionality basically identifies an increasing numbers of doors through which people can enter the conversation. So I feel very optimistic about it. And there's one group that I feel, now I'll get to the analysis part. So there's one group whose presence I have not felt at this meeting. And it is absolutely foundational to our understanding of men's power over women. And that is the power of some men over other men. And I'm speaking specifically here about the foundational, the foundation of much expression of masculinity rests on the deep, intimate connection between homophobia and misogyny. And I have not heard much about LGBT people. And so I want to say that if we are going to bring men into this conversation, if we're going to engage men and boys, we have to address the question of masculinity, not just males, but what it means to be a man. And if we engage masculinity, we have to understand how homophobia is such a foundation for it. That violence against women, for example, is often not always, but often a conversation among men, in which women are the currency by which men are communicating with each other. Rape in war, for example, is a conversation among men. I do this to your woman. I'm having a conversation with a man. I can do this. She is the currency, the vehicle by which I dominate other men. When men come out, I'll retract that because that has a specific meaning. When men step forward and say that they support gender equality in this country, the first assumption made about them is that they must be gay. As if to say, I love women so much that I want them to be as completely empowered as I am means that I must be gay because I don't hold them in contempt. Right? So the fact that this link between misogyny and homophobia is so deep and so intimate, and I think that is one of the issues that I think we need to be addressing in our conversation. How does the conversation among men, how does proving your masculinity to other men ramify in the ways in which we treat women and girls?
Thank you very much. We have a slight change to the schedule. We're going to ask Ms. Bernice King to speak, and then we're going to take a quick 5-minute break, and then we're going to come back for the final session. And before we start, I just wanted to take what Nika said and what Michael said, because Nika talked about the differences and yet the soul of humanity, and Michael talked about all the differences. And when I think about the legacy of the civil rights movement, it resonates everywhere, globally, generation after generation. So there's a universality about it at the end of the day. And I'm curious about what it's like for you and how you see yourself in the world and what you've been coming forward with. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And good afternoon, everyone. And I say amen to what Michael shared. And thank you for bringing that out. First, I want to applaud President Carter for his boldness in speaking about these issues and bringing them to the forefront, and his persistence, which I think is so important in our world, to have a voice like this. And so thank you, President Carter, for being an important voice and for convening this very important summit. And I apologize that I haven't been able to hear everything, but I also want to applaud everybody in this room. This year, when we celebrated my father's holiday, the theme that we had for it was Remember, Celebrate, Act, King's Legacy of Courage for Our World. And we did that because we thought it important for people to understand that one of the fundamental things that defined Dr. King was his courage. And that as we remember the sacrifices that were made by those 50 years ago to fight for civil rights, particularly the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act, it took a lot of courage for those individuals. And so I want to commend those in this room for your courage, because we know that this issue and so many other issues in our world are going to change because of people of courage. One of the fundamental premises of what we call Nonviolence 365, it's my father's philosophy and methodology of nonviolence. Some people call it Kingian nonviolence, is that nonviolence is a way of life for courageous people. And as the CEO of the King Center, we do a number of education and training in this model, this philosophy of life, which really is about, and I saw in the reading here, is about changing people's mindsets. It is understanding our human connectedness, regardless of how we identify and define ourselves. And I have been blessed growing up in this legacy to understand and appreciate the value of our humanity. You know, we talk about Dr. King a lot as a civil rights leader, but he really was one of the first in this country to really talk about globalization. In a book called Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos, a Community, he had a chapter entitled The World House. The fact that we had inherited this great big world house, and from different cultures, ethnicities, expressions. And we, through our technology and our science, have found a way to create neighborhoods, but we haven't found a way to create brother and sisterhoods. And we have to learn to do that, or we'll perish together as fools. There's one race in the world, and that's the human race. We are sisters, we are brothers, we are connected. And the philosophy and methodology, Nonviolence 365, brings people into an experience where they are first and foremost taught about this universality, to see yourself in another person, to kind of transcend what defines all of us externally and really kind of connect to who we are from a spiritual plane, that we're really spiritual beings having these human experiences, and to awaken in people their voice, that they do have within them the ability to transcend circumstances and find community that they can connect with, to work with them to bring about those changes. And so I just, again, want to thank President Carter and the Carter Center for everything you're doing in this regard. Our mission really is to help to usher in the beloved community through this philosophy and methodology, regardless of where people find themselves situated and what circumstances that they live under and exist. Because we do have to change people's thought processes. And my mother was very good at helping to really define this legacy. I call her the architect of the King legacy. She was very heavily involved in the peace movement even before she met my father, and was a very important voice in that movement and in women's rights. And I think if she were here today, she would still say that nonviolence is the way and it works, no matter what country you're situated in, no matter what the circumstance or the situation is. It changes people, literally. And sometimes we can't explain it to people until they go through the process. But it literally transforms people's lives. And it gives them what they need to be the instrument of change in the world. And so, again, I commend each and every one of you in here for being a voice, for being courageous. And I look forward to staying connected and in this critical and important work so that we get to a place where women and girls no longer have to feel ashamed just to be. Just to be. So thank you.
Thank you. So we can say that ahead of every great man was a visionary woman. So,
Yes, I like that. Thank you.
yeah. So we have a 5-minute stretch break, basically, and then we will come back for the last round of comments. Thank you so much.
President Carter had to leave a little early, which is why we broke. And he's not returning with us this afternoon until dinner. He will be with us at dinner. So I wanted to give everybody a chance just to stretch and have a little bit more time. We really don't have that much time left this afternoon. So you got your break. So I just want to sort of check in on a few things and talk about the program tomorrow. And if one of the speakers on the list wants to speak this afternoon, we've been really I wanted to tell you, we've been really trying to get everyone included in this conversation. And sometimes the topic lends itself to a particular situation, and we have changed things around from time to time. I hope you will be patient with us as we do that to make sure that the conversation continues to flow from one topic to the other. Since most of you, I believe, would like to speak when President and Mrs. Carter are here, we're going to just put a hold on the speakers list so that whoever wants to speak will know that their voices are fully heard, and we will resume first thing tomorrow morning. I would like to give a chance for our moderators and facilitators to make any observations now about today's discussions. Tomorrow morning, we will really turn our attention to our action commitments. You saw our presentation on our website where the Carter Center has committed to help maintain ongoing dialogue with all of you. And that's a very daunting commitment. I see my boss over here looking at me sideways. Saying, what are you promising, Karen? But I think she, of all people, and President Carter certainly, are very committed to supporting women peacemakers, women as agents of progress. And so we are really, as listening to you, we are calculating, thinking, what are the kinds of supports that we can provide? And I've sort of grabbed each of you from, sometimes I'll grab you in the coffee break and say, let's sit down and talk about what you said, you know. Because I think there are conversations that need to happen. We have experienced some of that. At lunch, we had a very lively discussion between friends who hadn't met each other in their own country in a context that was rather challenging for them to meet each other, but they met each other here and really challenged each other. And so this is what's exciting about this forum and this format for conversation. So what I'm hearing is the opportunity for us to help facilitate these discussions, because as I said at the beginning, we have, you know, created this collision between different communities, different worldviews, different approaches. But I'm thinking about what Susan Hayward said about, and this is coming from a longtime peace builder who's very invested in succeeding, that we have failed. We in the civil society and in the peace building and NGO, I mean, there's many, many successes, so we can't lose sight. We have made many, many successes. All of you are testament to the progress that has been made. But what this really is a chance for us to say, you know, it's all right, we're breaking down those walls and we really want to explore what is working, but what we need to really revisit. And so in the session tomorrow, I would like for us to really turn, and Susan Thistlethwaite is going to, hi Susan, really keep us moving along this train of what are the action items. And I hope over dinner, I'm going to seek a few of you out over dinner to really kind of drill down on some ideas that I've heard emerge. What kinds of collaborations could be fruitful? Bearing in mind that the Carter Center is very small, you know, there are 3 people in the Human Rights Program. So we really rely on these great partnerships and collaborations. And so this is a key to how it's going to go forward. And as Bernice King is joining us again, we have her for a few more minutes. It's so great to have her with us that I didn't want to let her get away before we have an opportunity to talk about a few things that she's been working on. She's been in Ferguson. She's a real peacemaker. Recently, we've been working together more on this idea of shifting the paradigm from fear to confidence. And I've heard her speak a few times recently, and she just inspires me so much. And this idea that if the cost of one F-1 bomber or one F-35 fighter that the Pentagon doesn't even want, if we could put a poster to say one F-35 fighter would pay for, you know, how many girls in country X to receive a full education from birth to graduate. How many detectives could we hire on college campuses to make sure that when a young woman reports rape, that that case can be investigated properly and not be immediately assumed to be making up the story. All of these things cost money, but we have to pay for that F-35 fighter. Why? So we really are in this moment of shifting, I feel. Everyone for the last 2 days has been saying, shift, 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 from fear to confidence, because we know what we have to do. There are no mysteries. Everyone in here has ideas, solutions, proposals, but what do we need? We need political will, and we need resources. So I'd like to ask Dr. King to help us. I mean, let's be in this together. We have the Nobel Summit in November here, Nobel Peace Summit. We have a real opportunity to build this message. Instead of war, peace. Malala said this. Instead of drones, books and schools. Why can't we put that message to the American people, to the people of the world who really need to be with us in this shift? So I'll turn it back over to Bernice and see if you have any advice for us as a woman peacemaker.
I wish I did have some advice because it all seems simple to us, I think. I think everybody in this room probably thinks the same when it comes to this. And shifting those priorities, I know that's one thing Dad talked about in 1967 in terms of reordering our priorities where people become front and center and not military power, control, and all of that. I think the reality is that a massive education campaign is necessary because I think most people don't understand what you just said, as simple as that is. Helping people to see the fundamental differences where our monies go. You know, the military-industrial complex, just how much we have invested in the military-industrial complex. And awakening people to how we can change that, because it's going to take a critical mass of people for that shift to be made. I mean, that's the reality. I mean, nothing's going to happen with, you know, everybody, but if you get that critical mass and putting that pressure on and people who are willing to operate in that confidence and willing to make that sacrifice that we've seen in so many different movements across the world, I think we can see that shift and that change. But, you know, it literally is going to take everybody in this room doing it and so many other people. So I would say starting first with an awareness campaign, because people's minds, I mean, most people who are bombarded with messaging, that's when things change their mind. And so I think that's the most important thing that we can begin to do before the actual change takes place.
Well, amen. And you know, this is what we've been hearing for 2 days, is that there is we are in a moment.
Yes, we are.
When everything seems to be topsy-turvy, you know, borders are disappearing, or at least de facto. People are, all kinds of things are democratizing. Communications are democratizing. Conflict is, religious narrative is democratizing, which is so influential. So many things are going into the hands of individuals. Yet we know that the young people are very eager and hungry for something to go to. This is why you have people flocking to ISIS and these movements, because they're hungry for something to go to. So does anyone want to speak to this very point before we wrap up? And I want to give Ambassador Peters a chance to have some final comments today, but is anyone want to really sort of just reflect on this question about what can we do together to really shift from fear to confidence? We know it's a hard job. I think what we've been hearing is we have to do the emergency work, but if we never start with the vision, if we really never revision where we're headed, we're still going to be on the wrong road. It's like we're heading down the wrong road and we're doing tactics and tactics, but we don't know that we're on the wrong road. So somebody's got to say, wait, the road is that way, right? And we've been hoping our religious leaders would do that. We've been hoping our politicians and political leaders would do that. So if they're not going to do it, who's left? It's the courageous people that you talked about, the people of courage who have to stand up and say, we're on the wrong road. This is a room full of courageous people. Jessica, did you have your hand up? No. So just Gideon and Jessica, and then maybe Ambassador Peters could give us the last word. Gideon first.
Well, I will speak from the faith perspective on that subject. That you read fear, hopelessness, and despair among suicide bombers, but also you read fear and anxiety among the victims of violence. So the courage Dr. King is talking about, we need to develop, and there are so many good writers here, if we can develop the philosophy and the ethics of the courage to hope. Because once you lose hope, you are finished. And this person who meets someone entering the gate and shoots, they don't have hope. So when I waited for, when I tested positive in 1992 and people were saying I have 3 months to die and so forth, I clung on that hope. And later on when medicine came and I took medicine and I recovered, and another science came and I produced children who were negative, I named them 2 important names. The first one I named love, and the other one I named hope. To remind the world that we need not hopeless hope, but grounded hope. And we have evidence that there is grounded hope from what victories we have already got. We have examples. So that's number one, that we need to work on the courage to hope. How does it look like? What drives it? The second one is focus on young people. I think we need a movement, and I'm glad that the representative of the United Nations High Commission on Human Rights really emphasized the issue of leadership. Is there a way the Carter Center can convene a follow-up meeting from this one to bring the voices of young people, some of them represented here, but expanding it better to say, hey, this is the communique we had. How do you see it from your perspective? How do we work with you as young people to grow a type of leadership that cannot be violent? That type of social engineering that Michael is talking about, that we can't run away from, that we need to create a leader with 6 characteristics: community health and family health competent, spiritually empowered, never to do to someone else what they would find hurtful if done to them, gainfully skilled, productively employed, social justice sensitive, and environmental health aware. A leader who understands socially sanctioned violence, socially ignored violence, but also socially undetected violence. that there is a lot of violence that people may even not understand it's violence. I am a person who works very early in the morning, 4 o'clock, I wake up to read and write, and my door sometimes squeaks. And I'm saying, am I being violent to my wife as I bang the door to go out? That sensitivity of knowing really to be your own policeman or policewoman, to know this language is violent. Young people, therefore, can lead the way to work with our professors to generate that type of curriculum, which we can now bring the education of the next century, beginning from now, to create a new world. The last point, 1 trillion. In our book, we are saying globally every year, on average, 1.75 trillion goes in military expenditure. I turned that around and I said, okay, if that is expenditure, that is income to someone. So how do we expect these people to give up easily without a fight? What is the carrot? Can the Carter Center work with people around here to do what Mo Ibrahim did? An inducement to find, you don't have the money to give the inducements, but you could give an award to a young person who brings on the table something that gives insights on how we can turn weapons into, how does the Bible say it? Turning the plowshares into what? Swords into plowshares. How do you do that? Because to move from being a lieutenant to a general, you have to kill. And lieutenant general means more money. So if I am no longer killing, how else is my status and my income being acquired? So we need some very bright minds to help us on that. And you can, again, engineer that discussion so that we see how we can, if someone gets 3 acres of agricultural land and we say, okay, now you are general in agriculture. If someone trains women and empowers them to overcome poverty and hopelessness, you say now you are lieutenant. And we give you that honor. That's my thinking.
So we're at the end, but Jessica, a couple minutes, and then I'm going to save you, Marwa, for tomorrow.
I just had
and then Ambassador Peters.
Thanks. Sorry, I just had a brief thought about hope since you asked the question, and I was thinking that really people inspire hope, and one of the most hopeful things I heard today was Binta's story about Malala in Nigeria, and the idea that a Chibok girl who's rescued or escapes meets Malala and wants to be Malala. That's so moving, you know, and I think, well, Malala's become such a global symbol. Anyone who's heard her speak at the UN or read what she's just really inspiring, and we need role models like her. But how do we know Malala? Because she got shot in the head. Right. I mean, that's the only reason we know Malala. I think there are Malalas all over the world. And the question I have is, how do we find them? And how do we make them as famous as Malala without shooting them in the head?
Okay, Ambassador Peters. I hope you have an answer.
We really should end on Jessica's question, but I did want to sum up with three things I learned from some of our speakers, things that just happened to resonate with me. And the first was from Senator Gillibrand, and I wrote it down. I think I'm going to have a T-shirt made, possibly on sale with other Carter Center stuff. And that was, be unrelenting. I really liked that. And along those lines, Sanam said, and I'm going to paraphrase, she said, patience is overrated, more or less. more or less, right? So that follows along with Senator Gillibrand's idea that it's 2015, and it's been 15 years since 1325 and 20 since Beijing, as we all know. And in that time, again, to quote Panetta, many, many women have died and suffered who ought not to have died and suffered. So let us be unrelenting and impatient. And the final thing, though, I heard, I hope I'm not mishearing, from Seema and Nika and others is be strategic, be smart, understand that not everyone seeks peace. Not everyone seeks justice. So those of us who do, those of you who toil in those fields need to be strategic and smart about who your allies are and whom you trust. And with that, I would just say thank you very much for a most stimulating and inspiring day.
Thank you, Ambassador Peters. So just a couple of things. We're reconvening first thing in the morning. So we do have a speakers list, and we're going to return to it under Susan's leadership. And I would just propose that the people on the speakers list, and the price of admission is you have to tell us the action you're going to take on this agenda, and the commitment, the call to action. What is your response to the call to action? Because that's the purpose of the session tomorrow. And so and we have, I see that they're not here, but we had a couple of our guests from Tunisia I really wanted to call on, and we ran out of time. And Senegal, we do have a long list. So that is our plea to you. Don't give up on us. We will call on you, but we want to think about how we're going to keep this conversation going. Just a couple of announcements. Please take everything with you. Don't leave any of your things at your seats, because we're going to reset the table tonight. The dinner, please, thank you, Reverend Guibord. Leave the headsets, the receivers on your table. Don't take them with you. Check your purses. Don't take them with you. The dinner will be upstairs, and there will be people to direct you to the location of the dinner. Thank you very much.